My name is Thea Clifton, and I am 33 years old. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, my mother filed an insurance claim against my company. My company cleans her house. It has cleaned her house for 11 years, and it has never once sent her a bill. The claim was $2,400 for a cracked lid on a cedar chest, and she filed it the way you return a sweater. When I called her about it, she was cheerful. She said, "That is what insurance is for, honey." Then she asked what I was bringing on Thanksgiving. I said pies. I always bring pies. But the claim was not the worst thing my mother did that month. What she said 9 days later at her own dinner table, standing up, holding a glass, in front of 14 guests, was worse. And my sister was sitting 3 feet away when she said it. What I said back to her ended us. Welcome back to Hidden Family Revenge. This is where we sit with the quiet ones, the women who kept everything running until the day they finally set it down. Every story here is about the moment somebody stopped asking to be counted. Drop a comment, and be sure to subscribe. The shop opens at 5:40. It is a leased bay on Bushkill Drive in Easton, 2 doors down from a place that rebuilds transmissions, and it smells like lemon and wet cotton no matter what season it is. Lila Quintero starts the coffee at 5:15 because she does not trust me to make it strong enough, and she is right about that. By the time I unlock the office, 4 vans are backed in and the whiteboard is already half filled. 14 names on that board. 14 households that eat because those vans go out. I check the glove box of van 1 before I check anything else, the way other people check for their wallet, and the folded paper in there is a $25,000 janitorial service bond issued by Saucon Mutual, and it is the reason a hospital wing will let my people carry keys. Hugo Nazario told me van 3 had a bearing noise on the Hellertown run. Cora Fenstermacher was wrapping her left knee on the tailgate with the same roll of tape she has used since September, and when I asked her about it, she said the knee was fine and the tape was for the boot. Cora is 58. She has been cleaning houses since she was 22, which is longer than my sister has been in school for anything. I wrote the day out in blue marker, address by address, crew by crew, and every line had a customer code beside it. Every line but one. Fernbrook Street had no code at all, because Fernbrook Street had never generated an invoice in 11 years, and nobody in that shop had ever asked me why. Wednesdays I do room 214 myself. Lark Hill Memory Care sits on a rise off Shonersville Road in Bethlehem, and their housekeeping contract puts baseboards on a 90-day rotation, which is fine for a hallway, and not fine for a woman who eats crackers in a recliner. So I bring my own caddy. I do the sills, the rails, the underside of the tray table where the apple juice dries into a ring, and I change the shelf liner in the closet because my grandmother has always folded her cardigans a particular way, and I am not going to be the reason she cannot find them. Her name is Rosalie Vandegrift. She is 88. On a good afternoon she surfaces for 4 or 5 minutes, and you learn not to spend those minutes on questions. That Wednesday she surfaced while I was wiping the window ledge. She watched me for a while. Then she said my name, correctly, first try, and she said that the cardigans go on the left because the light comes from the right. I told her I remembered. She patted the arm of the chair twice and said the thing she has said to me since I was 9 years old, in the voice of a woman handing over a set of tools. "You're the one who knows where things go." I put the rag down for a second so my hands would stay steady. Out at the desk, the charge nurse stopped me on the way past, friendly, half apologetic, and said that my mother had come by Monday and updated some paperwork. I asked which paperwork. She said she would have to look, and then a call light went off down the hall, and she went. Sunday dinner at 1418 Fernbrook Street starts at 4, and I get there at 20 past 3 because somebody has to preheat. My mother, Bernice, is 63, and she runs that dining room like a small, well-loved country. She had the good tablecloth out for a Sunday, which meant Adrienne was coming. My sister Adrienne is 36, and she is a physician, internal medicine, over at Willow Run in Allentown, and my mother recites her week to the room the way other people read the weather. There was a difficult case Tuesday. There was a thank you card from a family in Coopersburg. There was a conference in the spring that they have asked her to speak at, and my mother said the word asked like it had a serif on it. I peeled potatoes at the sink with my back to all of it, which is where I do my best listening. At some point, Aunt Charlene asked how the business was going, and my mother answered before I could. She said Thea's little thing keeps her plenty busy. Little thing. 4 vans and a payroll. I said it was going fine, because arguing about the size of my company at my mother's sink has never once made it bigger. Then I looked over and saw my sister asleep. Not resting. Asleep. Upright. With a fork in her hand. For maybe 20 seconds. And when she came out of it, she apologized to the whole table like she had committed a crime. Nobody else seemed to notice. I noticed. Later I started clearing plates and my mother put 2 fingers on my wrist, warm as anything, and said, "Don't start the dishes yet, honey. Let people see the table." So I sat back down and let people see the table. People hear the words cleaning company and picture a woman with a bucket. And they are not wrong, they are just early. I started at 19 with a bucket and a 2004 Corolla and a flyer I printed at the library. I filed the LLC in 2016. 10 years later, there are 14 people on payroll, and every one of them is a real employee, not a contractor, which means workers' compensation from the first hire, because Pennsylvania does not play about that. There is $1 million in general liability. There is the bond in the glove box. There is a lease on the Bushkill Bay through 2029 that I signed personally, which means if the vans stop, they do not come for the company, they come for me. Neil Larkin does my books 2 mornings a week and he is 66, and he still calls the payroll tax filings the 941s, like they are a band. Cora's knee needs a replacement she keeps postponing because the deductible resets in January. Lila's daughter is a sophomore at a state school, and the tuition bill comes twice a year like weather. None of this makes me rich. I want to be clear about that, because later on people are going to hear the end of this story and assume there was money hiding somewhere. There was not. There was a checking account that has to clear a payroll every other Friday, and a phone that rings when a hot water heater lets go in somebody's basement at 9 at night. Everything I own is a promise I made to somebody else. That is the part my mother never understood, and it is also, I think now, the part she understood better than anyone. The Women's Fellowship at Grace Bethany Lutheran does a luncheon the second Thursday of every month, and my mother has run it since before I could drive. She asked me to come because they needed the kitchen turned over afterward, and I said yes, because I always say yes, and also because I like those women. Adrienne came for the first half hour in her clinic clothes. My mother took her around the room by the elbow and introduced her the same way each time. Full sentence, no shortcuts. This is my daughter, Dr. Adrienne Clifton Prentice, internal medicine. When she got to me, she put her hand flat on my back, which is her warmest gesture, and said, "This is Thea. She helps people with their houses." A woman named Gail Kinsey, who is the pastor's wife and who has been kind to me my whole life, brightened up and asked if I could give her a quote for a deep clean before her son's wedding. And my mother laughed. Not a mean laugh. A hostess laugh, the kind that smooths a room out. She said, "Oh, Gail, don't put her to work at a luncheon. There's work you mention, and work you don't." The table laughed with her, easy and fond, and Gail laughed too and let it go. And the conversation moved to the parking lot resurfacing. I stood there holding a stack of dessert plates. Here is what took me another year to understand. My mother was not trying to hurt me. She thought she was being gracious. She thought she was protecting Gail from an awkward moment and protecting me from a job at a party. And she went home that afternoon proud of how well the luncheon had gone. My father is Desmond Clifton. He is 66 and he spent 31 years as a maintenance supervisor for the Monocacy Area School District, which means he knows every boiler in Northampton County by its first name. He does not argue with my mother. I have never once heard him do it. What he does instead is fix things without being asked, which in his mind is the same as saying something. That afternoon, I came out of the luncheon and found him in my parents' garage with a drain pan under my van, changing my oil, because he had noticed the sticker in my windshield was 2,000 miles stale. I hadn't told him I was coming. He just kept the pan on the shelf now. I sat on the step and we talked about the bearing noise in van 3 and whether Hugo was right about it, and he said Hugo was probably right, and that was 10 minutes of the best conversation I'd had all week. Then I said, without planning to, that Mom had done the thing again at the luncheon. He wiped the dipstick on a shop rag. He looked at it. He put it back. And he said, "Your mother came up hard." That was the whole sentence. He dropped the hood and it caught on the first try because my father has never once had to slam a hood in his life. I stood there in the driveway with my keys in my hand and did not tell him that I already knew exactly how hard, and exactly what it had cost her, and exactly who had told me. I had known since I was 19. I had never said it out loud to a living soul. Grace Bethany turned 75 that fall, and the anniversary committee put together a commemorative booklet. Glossy cover, 400 copies. My mother chaired the committee. Page 9 was a tribute spread called Daughters of the Congregation, which honored the women who had grown up in that church and gone out into the world, and it was laid out in 2 columns with photographs. Adrienne got a photograph. Under it, in bold, Dr. Adrienne Clifton Prentice, MD, Internal Medicine, Willow Run, Allentown. 3 lines about her residency and her board certification, and her work with the county's free clinic on Saturdays, which she really does, and which she really is good at. My name was in the second column, in the run-on list at the bottom where they put the ones who did not get photographs, set in type so small I had to hold the page up to the window. It said, Thea, who helps. Not Thea Clifton, not the name of a company that has employed 14 people and cleaned that church's fellowship hall free every Christmas Eve since 2017. Thea, who helps. My mother wrote the page herself. She was proud of it. She called me the night the booklets came back from the printer to tell me they had come out beautifully and that the paper stock was heavier than they had paid for. I said that was nice. She said, "Oh, and honey, while I have you, I need a small favor." Her voice did the thing it does when the favor is already arranged, and I am the last one to hear about it. Adrienne and Grant had bought a house in Saucon Valley in September, a 1940s colonial with good bones and 40 years of somebody else's cooking baked into the kitchen cabinets. The housewarming was set for the last Saturday of October. My mother had already told my sister, and, it turned out, had already told Aunt Charlene and Gail Kinsey, and at least one person at the bank, that Thea's crew would have the place done before the party. Not that Thea might be able to help, that it was handled. I did the arithmetic while she was still talking, because I do that arithmetic in my sleep. 2 days, 3 people, 48 labor hours, plus chemicals, plus the truck mount for the stairs, plus 2 people not on a paying job on a Friday in October when everybody in the Lehigh Valley wants their house clean before the holidays. Call it $1,900 of capacity. Gone. I said yes. I want to be honest about why, because it was not kindness and it was not fear. It was that saying no would have cost more than $1,900. It would have cost me 2 months of phone calls, of my mother telling people the story of how her daughter would not help her own sister, and every one of those people knows somebody who hires cleaners. That math is real. Anybody who has run a small business in a town where their mother goes to church already knows it. So I said yes, and I hung up, and I stood in the shop for a minute. It was the 9th time in 6 years. I know it was the 9th because Lila came over with her clipboard, looked at the whiteboard, and asked me the same question she asks about every job that goes on that board. What's the work order number? I gave it work order 4471 and I billed it at $0. That is not sentiment. That is how you keep a company from rotting. Every address gets a ticket. Every ticket gets before and after photographs, a chemical log, and a signed completion sheet. Because 6 years ago, a woman in Palmer Township told me her sideboard had been scratched by my crew, and I had nothing to show her but my own memory, and I paid $400. I did not have to make it go away. I built the form that same night, so that Thursday and Friday we did Saucon Valley by the book. Lila, Trina Kowalczyk, and Hugo. Hardwood, 2 bathrooms, the inside of every cabinet, the range hood filter that had never been washed since the Clinton administration. Adrienne was at a conference in Pittsburgh, so Grant signed the completion sheet at the kitchen island with a pen he had to borrow from Trina. Here is the part I have gone over 100 times since. My completion sheet has a line for surfaces cleaned and a line for damage observed. It does not have a line for the condition of furniture we are asked to move, because in 11 years no client had ever asked us to move furniture on a job we were not being paid for. I wrote a note to myself in the margin that night. Fix the form. I still have that note. On our way out, Hugo and Trina carried my grandmother's cedar chest up from the dining room to the second-floor landing, because my mother had asked for it to go up there. And it is 110 pounds of 1930s cedar with brass hinges. When Hugo set it down, the lid made a sound. A short, dry crack, like a knuckle. Everybody in that hallway heard it. Nobody said anything. The housewarming was the following Saturday, and I went, in a green sweater, standing inside a clean I had paid for with my own Friday. There is a strange feeling in a room like that. You know where every fingerprint used to be. Grant's colleagues were there, and two neighbors, and Dr. Harold Mattingly, who is the senior physician at my sister's practice, a big, careful man of 61 with a laugh you can hear through drywall. He shook my hand and asked what I did. My mother was 2 feet away with a glass of wine, and she answered for me before I had the breath. She said, "Oh, Thea takes care of houses. She's wonderful with older clients." Then she moved him along toward the sunroom. I went to get more ice. Adrienne came into the pantry behind me and shut the door most of the way, and she stood there with her back against the shelves for a second, and she said, "I didn't ask her to do that." I said, "I know." She said, "I would have paid you." I said, "I know that too." Then she said something she had never said to me, in a flat voice like she was reading a lab value. She said, "I don't sleep, Thea." I asked how long. She said, "Since June." She did not apologize for the Free Friday, and she did not defend our mother, and she did not fall apart. Because Adrienne does not fall apart. She just goes very still and very exact. Then somebody called her name from the kitchen and she straightened her shoulders and went. And I stood in the pantry with a bag of ice going soft in my hands, and something I had believed about my sister for 20 years came loose. Larkhill holds a care conference every 6 months. 10 people around a table in a room with a fake fireplace, and the family sits on one side. My mother brought Adrienne. Adrienne came straight from a clinic session and had her badge still clipped to her waistband, and the social worker, a decent woman named Vivian, addressed roughly everything to her. Medication review, to Adrienne. Fall risk, to Adrienne. The question about whether the family wanted to discuss hospice benchmarks in the spring, to Adrienne. My sister answered carefully and well and kept glancing at me, because my sister is not stupid, and because she has been in the room with my grandmother maybe 9 times in 4 years. I have been in that room every Wednesday since 2022. I know Nana's shoe size is a 7 narrow, and that she will not wear the left one if the seam sits wrong. I know she gets agitated around 4 in the afternoon when the meal carts come down the corridor, and that it is not the carts, it is the wheels on the tile, and that if you turn the television to a ballgame with the sound low, it passes in 10 minutes. Nobody asked me anything. That is not a complaint. It is just the shape of the meeting. At the end, I did what I always do, which is hand the floor nurse a care sheet I keep updated in my own handwriting, 1 page, laminated, the things that are not in any chart. She took it. Then she looked at it, and looked at the front desk, and said, in a careful voice, that she was going to have to check who was allowed to accept this now. The next Wednesday I came in at 1 with my caddy, and the girl at the front desk could not find me. She was new and she was mortified and she kept scrolling. Authorized visitors, 4 names. My mother. My father. Adrienne. Grant. I stood there in a memory care lobby holding a bucket and asked her to check the guest option instead, which is 30 minutes in the common room. Signed in. Escorted. She was so relieved she nearly hugged me. I called my mother from the parking lot and kept my voice level, because the parking lot at Larkhill is not a place to raise your voice, and because I have learned that the second I get loud, whatever I said stops being the subject. She was pleasant. She said she had simplified the contact list because there were too many cooks. She has held my grandmother's financial and health care power of attorney since 2021, signed while Nana still had capacity, witnessed, Notarized, entirely correct. I have read it. It is a good document. It says my mother decides. I asked her, plainly, to put me back on. She said, "Honey, Adrienne is the doctor, and if there's ever a decision at 2 in the morning, they need one person to call." I said that was about decisions, and I was talking about Wednesdays. And she said it again, in the exact same warm voice she had used at the luncheon, about a completely different thing. "There's work you mention, and work you don't." Then she said she had to go. The roast. I sat in the van for a while with the engine off. The lot was full of cars belonging to people visiting people who might not know them. And I took my keyring out of my coat pocket, and for the first time in 11 years I actually looked at it. It is a brass ring the size of a coffee cup rim, and it is heavy enough that it has worn a shine into the lining of every coat I have owned. 31 keys. Each one wears a little yellow tag with a code written in oil pen, because you never write an address on a key. Ever. And I have fired one person in 10 years, and that is why. I went through them one at a time in the driver's seat with the door open. B14. Barrett Brubaker in Hellertown, whose wife died in 2021, and whose daughter Patrice hires us for the whole house twice a month, and for the estate work when the time comes. K03. The Kinseys. F22. The office building on Ferry Street. 11 suites. Our first commercial account. The pediatric practice off Freemansburg. The Sunday school wing. 28 of them had a code, and every code lived in a system, and every system produced an invoice, and every invoice produced a payroll. Then there were 3 keys with no code on the tag at all. Someone, years ago, had written on them in my own handwriting, Fernbrook, 214, Saucon. My parents' front door, my grandmother's room, which I could no longer enter, my sister's kitchen. 3 keys to 3 places that had never once, in 11 years, generated a single dollar or a single line in any book I keep. And they were on the same ring, not a separate ring in a drawer. The same ring, riding in the same coat pocket, going out on the same route, coming home at the same hour. That was the whole problem, and it took me 11 years and a lobby desk to see it. If you are carrying a set of keys to somebody else's house right now, a parent, a sister, a place you clean because nobody else will, you already know exactly what that ring weighs. Tell me in the comments whose key you are still carrying. Then stay with me, because this is the part where I finally counted mine. That night, I opened the scheduling software at the shop because I wanted to see the shape of it. I need to be clear about something. I did not pull those records to build a case. I have never shown them to anyone. I pulled them because every address in my life has a ticket, including the ones I do not charge for, because that is the only way a schedule stays honest, and because if a crew of mine goes into a house, I want a record that they were there. I filtered on the 3 uncoded addresses and set the range to the beginning. 11 years came back. Deep cleans before every holiday at Fernbrook, twice a year, going back to 2015. The gutters the fall my father's shoulder went. 2 full days after the basement took water in 2018. Room 214, every Wednesday for 4 years, plus the move-in, plus the winter my grandmother kept hiding food in the closet and I did the whole thing over on a Sunday. Saucon Valley, and the apartment before Saucon Valley, and the townhouse before that. Then the total hours in the corner of the screen, in gray, the way software gives you a number without any idea what it is handing you. I looked at it for a while. I did not print it. I did not photograph it. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark shop with 4 vans breathing behind me, and I noticed that I was not angry. That surprised me. What I felt was a tiredness with a different grain to it, the kind you get when you finally set a load down and realize your arms have been shaped by it. Common room visits are 30 minutes and they are supervised and they smell like coffee and carpet shampoo. I brought butterscotch candies because they are the only thing Nana still reliably wants. She was in the chair by the aquarium with a napkin in her lap, folding it and unfolding it, and when I sat down, she looked up and said my name. Not Thea, honey. Thea. She asked me whether I had eaten. She told me the aquarium man came on Tuesdays and was too rough with the plants. Then she took my hand and turned it over and looked at my knuckles, which are always cracked from October through March no matter what I put on them, and she rubbed her thumb across them once and said it. "You're the one who knows where things go." I said yes, ma'am. And 2 minutes later, mid-sentence, about the plants, she called me Bernice. She asked me if I had gotten the girls their supper. She was not distressed. She was perfectly content, having a nice afternoon with her daughter. I sat there and answered as her daughter for 11 minutes, because the alternative is correcting an 88-year-old woman about who she is talking to, and I will not do that. Afterward, in the corridor, the nurse who has been kind to me said, without my asking, that in her experience the window where they still know faces is usually about a year. Maybe a little more. She said it gently, as a kindness, so that I would use the time. I thanked her. Then I went out to the van and sat with my hands on the wheel and did not start it for a while, and the clock that had been running quietly in the background of my life started making a sound. Lou Ferraro has written my insurance since I had one van. He is 61, he keeps a bowl of pretzels on his desk, and he calls me kid, which I have decided to allow. He called on a Tuesday morning in early November and said, in the flat voice he uses when something is already a fact, that there was a liability claim open against me. $2,400, filed against Second Shift Home and Estate Care by a claimant named Bernice Clifton. Damage to an antique cedar chest during a move at a residence in Saucon Valley on October 24th. I asked him to read me the claimant name again. He read it again. I sat down on the bumper of van 2 in my own parking lot. Then I called my mother, and she picked up on the second ring, and she was chopping something. I asked her if she had filed a damage claim against my company. She said yes, and asked me if I wanted the recipe for the sausage stuffing, because Charlene wanted it. I said, Mom. She said, honey, the lid is cracked. It was cracked by your men. And that is what insurance is for. Not one note of guilt in it. Not one. She was not getting away with something. In her mind, there was nothing to get away with, because a policy is a form, and a form is not a person. And I was the one who had told her, years ago, proudly, at that same kitchen table, that a real company carries insurance for exactly this. She had listened, and then she said, the thing that has stayed with me longest, warm as bread. You're the one who's good at this. Lou called back that afternoon to walk me through the process. At the end he said, you know this touches the Thornberry bid, right? Thornberry Property Group manages 9 medical and professional buildings between Allentown and Phillipsburg, and they had put out a request for proposals in September for a 3-year janitorial contract. Section 4, Paragraph 2. Bidders shall submit 5-year loss runs and demonstrate 3 consecutive years free of general liability claims. I had 4 years and 2 months. That contract was worth $186,000 a year. Not profit, revenue. But it was the kind of revenue that changes what a company can promise. It was a $2 an hour raise across 14 people. It was Cora Fenstermacher off ladders and onto a day crew where she could sit for her lunch and get that knee done in February. It was a 5th van. Lou told me the fastest way to end it was to settle it myself, so I did. $2,400 out of my own account, not the company's, on a Thursday, and Saucon Mutual closed the file with no payout in 9 days, but a closed claim is still a claim. It sits on the loss run for 5 years like a nail in a tire that has been plugged. I called Thornberry's facilities director and asked, straight out, whether a paid and closed claim under $3,000 would disqualify a bidder. She said a closed claim with no payout was scored, not disqualifying, and that she appreciated me asking, rather than hoping. Then she said the field was strong. That night, Neil Larkin stayed late with me and we rebuilt the bid, and I cut my own margin by 6% to make the number sing, and I signed it, and I drove it to the drop box myself instead of trusting the mail. And then I went home and did not sleep, which is a thing I had recently learned my sister does too. I drove out to Fernbrook on a Sunday afternoon and asked my mother to withdraw the claim. I did it right. No audience, no sister, no raised voice. I sat at her kitchen table with a cup of her coffee and explained what a surety claim does to a bid file. In plain words, the way you would explain it to a client. I told her about Section 4, Paragraph 2. I told her what the contract was worth to Cora's knee. She listened all the way through, which she does. Because my mother is not a woman who talks over people. She is a woman who waits and then arranges. When I finished, she folded her hands and said no. Not angrily. She said the lid was cracked, and the claim was honest, and she would not lie to an insurance company. Then she explained the rest of it to me, kindly, and I want to put it down the way she said it, because I have never heard her say anything truer. She said that every family needs one person they can say out loud at a party, and one person who takes care of the rest. She said that is not unfair, it is how a family stays standing, and that a house where everybody wants to be the one you brag about is a house that falls down. She said I had always been the one who could carry it, and she meant that as the highest compliment she had. Then she patted my hand and thanked me for not making a scene about the claim, and she said she had told Charlene I was reasonable about it, and that she was proud of me for that. 2 nights later, I drove her to the pharmacy in Bethlehem for my father's blood pressure refill, because the parking there is bad, and she does not like the left turn after dark. On the way back she was quiet, which is unusual, and then she started talking without me asking. She said that in 1982 she was 19, and she cleaned rooms at the Hotel Merivale on the South Side, $7 an hour, 6 days. She said she had a uniform with her first name embroidered on it and no last name, and that she liked the work, which surprised me. Then she told me about a Saturday in June that year. A wedding in the ballroom. Her own graduating class. Half of them. 3 years out of high school. She was on turndown, so she used the service stairs by the kitchen, up and down all night, and the door at the top opened onto the corner of the ballroom floor. She said a woman she had known since 3rd grade, the bride's mother, walked over holding a plate with a piece of cake mashed on it and a napkin balled in the middle, and handed it to her in the middle of the dance floor without ever once looking at her face. Not cruelly. Just the way you hand something to a surface. My mother said that part twice, without looking at her face. Then she looked out the windshield at the Faye Bridge and she said, "So don't tell me what it costs." That is the closest my mother has ever come to explaining herself to me. It lasted about 90 seconds. 3 minutes later, on Broad Street, I said something about the crew getting the Kinsey job done quick, and she corrected me and said the word is quickly. And she was already back. She had not been asking me to understand her. She had been telling me why I was wrong. The Two Rivers Chamber of Commerce named Second Shift Home and Estate Care its Small Business of the Year in the service category. It came by email at the end of September, and I read it 4 times standing between 2 vans. It is not a national award. There were maybe 140 people at the dinner on the second Thursday in November, at the banquet hall out on Northampton Street, chicken and green beans and a cash bar. But somebody outside my own head had looked at what I built and put a name on it, and I am not going to pretend that did not matter. I got 4 tickets. I invited my whole family 6 weeks out, and again 3 weeks out. Adrienne had a shift and said so honestly and sent flowers to the shop, which I still have the vase from. My mother did not answer either message. My father came. He wore the gray jacket he wears to funerals, and he sat at a table near the back, with a woman from a hardware store in Wilson. And when they called second shift, I went up with Lila Quintero, because you do not accept that alone, and she held the plaque, and I said something short into a microphone. When I got back to the floor, my father was standing by the door with his jacket over his arm. He said it was a real nice thing, and that he was proud of me. Then he said he had to get back. Your mother's expecting me. The photographer took the group picture 9 minutes later. I hung the plaque in the shop, over Neil's desk, where the people who earned it would see it. It never occurred to me to hang it anywhere else. Thornberry called on the 11th of November. We won. 3 years, 9 buildings, start date January 5th, with a 90-day performance review built in. I put the phone down on the desk and Trina asked if somebody had died. I sat down and read the award letter properly, all 4 pages, because I have learned to read all 4 pages. Building 6 on the schedule was a two-story medical office building on Cedar Crest, 41,000 square feet, 11 tenants. I knew the address before I finished the line. It is my sister's building. Willow Run Internal Medicine has the entire second floor, north side, and Dr. Harold Mattingly's name is on the glass by the elevator, and my sister parks in the second row because the first row is for the ultrasound techs who get there at 6. My people would be in that building 5 nights a week. My name would be on the sign-in binder at the front desk and on the door tag of the janitorial closet. The single largest thing I have ever built in my working life turned out to sit directly underneath the floor my sister walks every morning at 7:15. I did not laugh. I want to say I laughed, but I did not. I sat there and thought about my mother finding out, and about the specific way she would tell it at the fellowship luncheon, and how she would not even mean it badly. Then I decided that was not my problem, and I emailed my acceptance, and I told the crew, and Hugo whooped in a way that made the transmission guys next door look over. My sister had never been to my shop. Not once in 10 years. She came on a Thursday at 9 at night, still in scrubs. And she stood in the doorway of my office looking at the whiteboard with the 14 names on it, like it was a chart she did not know how to read. She said Grant told her. She said Mom does not know yet. Then she sat down on the folding chair across from me and asked me to withdraw. She did not do it the way I had braced for. She was not smug, and she did not say one word about doctors or cleaners. She said, Mom will make it a story. She said, she will tell it at every table for the rest of her life. Then she put her hands flat on her knees and told me things I had not known. That she had wanted to teach music, and that she had gotten as far as an audition at 19 and never told our mother about it. That she sat for her boards the same summer her marriage went quiet, and passed, and cried in a stairwell about the wrong thing. That she is not allowed to be tired in that family, ever, because if she is tired, then the whole point of her is in question. She said she has been the thing they point at since she was 15, and she does not know how to put it down. She said, you at least get to be a person. I said that was a hell of a thing to say to somebody at the bottom of the list. She said she knew. And then she asked me again, quietly, please. And my sister has never once asked me for anything. I withdrew the bid the next morning. 2 sentences to the facilities director, thanking her for the opportunity and citing a capacity conflict, because you never burn a client with the truth when a lie of omission is more professional. She wrote back inside the hour and said she was sorry to hear it, and that she would go to the second-ranked bidder. 10 days later, a company out of Whitehall started mobilizing on 9 buildings. I told the crew on a Monday that the raises I had promised for December were moving to April. I did it standing up, in front of everybody, because you say that kind of thing to people's faces. Nobody argued. Cora said April's fine, hun, and went to get her tape. That was worse than arguing. Lila waited until the bay cleared and the vans were gone, and then she leaned in my office doorway with her keys in her hand and did not sit down. She said, I have never asked you why about anything. She said, I am asking now. So I told her the truth. All of it. In about a minute. She listened. Then she said the sentence I have carried since. You took that off my table to keep your mother comfortable. She was not shouting. She said it the way you read out a lab result. And she was right. And we both knew she was right. And there was nothing I could put after it. I have given up a lot of things to keep a room comfortable. If you have ever paid for somebody else's piece out of your own pocket, you know exactly what that email cost me. Tell me in the comments what you gave up to keep the peace. Then stay with me, because Thanksgiving was 10 days out. Lila gave her notice that Wednesday. 9 years. She had been my first hire, back when I could not afford her, and she took a crew lead job with an outfit in Bethlehem that runs commercial contracts and pays $1 more with a clothing allowance. She told me on a Wednesday morning, professionally, 2 weeks, and she offered to train Trina up herself. And she did. There was no scene. That is the part people do not understand about losing somebody. There was no door slammed. She just started keeping her coat on in the shop. On her last day, 2 weeks later, she left a binder on my desk, 3 inches thick, tabbed by client, with the route order and the gate codes, and which houses have dogs, and which client wants the shower door left open, and which one counts the coasters. She had been building it for years. I had never asked her for it. Hugo told me on the Monday after, kindly, that the crew had talked about it and nobody blamed me and everybody understood. I would rather he had told me. They were furious. That night, I drove out to Fernbrook with a covered dish, because it was the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and my mother had asked me to bring the sweet potatoes early so the refrigerator could be sorted out. I parked across the street. The dining room light was on, and I could see my mother moving around inside, setting out the leaves for the table. I sat there with the dish on the passenger seat until the glass fogged, and then I drove back to Easton, and I ate the sweet potatoes myself standing up at my own counter. On the Monday before Thanksgiving, I sat down at my desk at 6 in the morning and opened the template I use maybe twice a year. Second shift letterhead. Notice of discontinuation of service. It is a plain thing. Account name, service address. A line that says 30 days written notice as required under our service agreement, an effective date, and a sentence offering to provide the incoming provider with a scope summary as a courtesy. I have sent that letter to a landlord who would not fix a hot water tank, and to a man in Forks Township who talked to Trina in a way I do not tolerate. I filled it in twice. Account, Clifton, W&L service address, 1418 Fernbrook Street, Bethlehem. Effective December 26th. Account, Prentice, A and G, service address, Saucon Valley. Effective December 26th. I signed them both with the same pen I sign payroll with. Then I drove to the post office on Ferry Street when it opened and sent them certified return receipt. And the clerk asked if I wanted the tracking texted to me, and I said yes. I could not send one to room 214, because I am not on that list anymore. So instead, I mailed the facility a clean copy of the care sheet in a plain envelope. One page, the shoe size and the 4 o'clock carts, and the ball game, with the sound low, addressed to the nursing supervisor. No note. In the parking lot, I took the ring out of my pocket and worked the Fernbrook key and the Saucon key off it. And then I stopped and put them back on, because I still had to cook on Thursday, and I would still need to get in the door at 9 in the morning like I always do. That is the truth of it. I made it 30 days official and I still put the keys back on the ring, but the post office had stamped it. After that, there was no version of me that could ever walk into that house as a daughter again. Thanksgiving morning, I got to Fernbrook at 9, the way I have gotten there at 9 for 11 years, with 2 pies and a roasting pan and my own knife roll, because my mother's knives could not cut warm butter. The house smelled like celery and coffee. My father had the leaves in the table already, and the good cream tablecloth was on and pressed. Larkhill brought my grandmother out at 11 in their van with an aide, a day pass, back by 6:30. And I was allowed to be in the room with her, but not alone with her, which is a sentence I never expected to have to hold in my mouth. She sat in the wing chair by the front window with a blanket over her knees and watched the street. At noon, I did the turkey, and at 1 I did the potatoes, and at 2 I started the gravy, and Adrian came into the kitchen twice and stood there not helping and not leaving. 14 of them ended up around that table. My mother had counted the chairs out loud on Tuesday. I was the 15th. And there has never been a chair for the 15th, because the 15th is at the counter with a dish towel over her shoulder, and I want to be honest and say I had never once in my life asked for one. My father came through the hallway around 2:30 with the empty ice bucket and stopped, and he said it quietly, without looking at me, the way he says everything true. Your mother got your letter Tuesday. I asked what she said about it. He said she had not said one word about it to anybody, not to him, not on the phone to Charlene, not once in 3 days. And I stood there with a whisk in my hand and understood exactly what that meant. She was saving it. She always saved it for the table. Dinner went out at 4. My mother is genuinely good at this, and I will not take it from her. The plates were hot, the rolls came out at the right minute, and she had everybody laughing before the gravy went around twice. Pastor Roy Kinsey and Gail, Dr. Harold Mattingly and his wife Greta, Aunt Charlene and Uncle Merritt, my cousin Britt and her fiancé Devin, Grant, Sylvie, Cal in the booster seat. My grandmother between my mother and Adrienne where she could be watched. At 4:40 my mother stood up with her glass. The first toast was to Adrienne, and it was a good toast, warm and specific, about a patient's family who had written to the practice. Everybody drank. Then she stayed on her feet, because she was not done, and she did the thing she does where she rests one hand on the back of my father's chair and lets the timing sit. She said, "Well," she said, "one daughter became a doctor." And then, with the pause she had built for it, "The other cleans houses." 14 people laughed. All 14. Roy Kinsey laughed into his napkin, and Greta Mattingly put her hand on Harold's arm, and my Aunt Charlene said, "Oh, Bernice, the way you say it when somebody is being wicked and wonderful." My grandmother laughed too, a happy little laugh, because everyone at her table was laughing and she has always been agreeable, and my mother raised the glass again. She said, "To Adrienne," she said, "12 years of school, so this family has somebody to point at." Adrienne did not lift her glass. She looked at the tablecloth, and Sylvie, who is 6, had slid off her chair during the second toast to come ask me for more cranberry, and she pulled on the cuff of my sweater and looked up and asked me why that was funny. I have thought 1,000 times about what actually moved me, and it was not the joke. I had taken that joke, in one form or another, for 11 years, and I could have taken it for 11 more. It was a 6-year-old asking me a straight question and waiting for an honest answer, and understanding, standing there with a dish towel on my shoulder, that I had been answering it for her whole life, with my silence. I had been teaching that child which kind of work turns you into a person and which kind turns you into help. I folded the towel in half and set it on the counter. Then I walked to the end of the table where my mother was still standing with her glass. I took the ring out of my coat pocket, and it made that low sound brass makes through good linen, and I laid 3 keys on the tablecloth in a row. Fernbrook, 214, Soissons. Then I said it, and I did not raise my voice, and I have been told since that the room could hear me perfectly well. I said, "Mom's right." I said, "I clean houses." And then I said all of it out loud in that dining room, in front of a pastor and my sister's department chief, and 2 neighbors and everybody my mother has spent 40 years arranging herself in front of. I told them I clean bathrooms at 6 in the morning. I told them about Cora Fenstermacher's left knee, 58 years old, 36 years on her feet, putting off a replacement until her deductible resets. I told them Leila Quintero gave me 9 years and built a 3-inch binder nobody asked her for. I told them there are 14 names on a whiteboard on Bushkill Drive, and every one of them has a household behind it, and that there is a $25,000 bond folded in the glove box of Van 1, and that the name painted on the side of that van is Second Shift Home and Estate Care. I said my own company's name out loud, in that room, for the first time in 10 years. Nobody had ever said it at that table, including me. Then I looked down at the 3 keys and I said, "I'm not doing this house anymore." I said, "Or Nana's room. Or Adrienne's." And I said the last part to the whole table, because it was true for the whole table. Somebody here is going to have to learn where things go. Pastor Kinsey set his fork down on the edge of his plate very carefully. Harold Mattingly looked into his water glass. Grant looked at my sister, and my sister had both hands flat on the table and her face was wet, and she was not making any sound at all. Aunt Charlene started to say my name and stopped. And then I did the part that cost me. I turned to my mother. She was still on her feet with the glass in her hand, and she had gone the color of the tablecloth, and I said the next part